When the first live-action Transformers feature film opened in the summer of 2007, it took the world by storm, and an instant franchise was made. Director Michael Bay would return for 4 more sequels made over the next decade. The first few of those went from strength to strength, financially at least, with the 3rd and 4th movie even crossing $1 billion each. Story-wise, however, the sequels were all subject to heavy criticism, and by the time of the 5th movie in the franchise, the consistent perceived lack of quality had caught up with it. 2017's The Last Knight bombed relative to expectations and budget. Bumblebee, the 2018 spin-off movie directed by Travis Knight, not Michael Bay, continued this downward trajectory as it grossed less than $500 million worldwide, a franchise low. But Bumblebee brought back something the franchise had not seen since the very first movie: positive reviews. So much so that quite a few of the critics agreed with quite a few of the fans that Bumblebee might have been the best movie of the franchise, and it left many more looking forward to seeing the series continue in the direction Bumblebee set forth. They shouldn't get too excited just yet though, as producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura has in several statements implied that a return to the general direction set forth by Michael Bay may be on the cards instead. In this editorial, I will begin by briefly providing my thoughts on the first 5 Michael Bay movies, before giving my review on Bumblebee, and where I think the franchise should go from there. Then I'll go over Lorenzo di Bonaventura's comments and see what his statements implies for where the franchise might actually go. I did grow up with a G1 cartoon, and despite having some issues with Bay's redesigns, I, like most everyone else, overall greatly enjoyed the first movie. Seeing it for the first time back in 2007 was one of the best times I had in a cinema up until then, and I know I was not alone in feeling that. I believe the next 4 sequels were all carried by the strength of that first movie, because none of them carried themselves. I've seen all of them, in theaters, but the only one I remember in detail is the first. All the others are just a blur I've honestly no desire to rewatch. I remember the second had Autobot Heaven, which was dumb, and something with pyramids, which was also dumb. The third had Soundwave, and something with not being able to afford going back to the moon. The fourth had China, and the fifth had King Arthur and a robo-butler from Downton Abbey for some reason. And none of them made any sense, not even to their internal logic, and they all sucked to high heavens. I came to find them so frustrating that I swore off Bumblebee the moment it was announced, because I was done with the franchise. Then I saw the Bumblebee trailers and was blown away by the G1 designs. Still so burned out on the franchise that I almost didn't see Bumblebee in theaters though, but towards the end of its run, and after hearing the positive word of mouth, I caved. I'm glad I did. Bumblebee was helmed by Kubo and the 2 Strings director Travis Knight, and was written by up-and-coming writer Christina Hodson. A term that frequently appears in conjunction with Christina Hodson's writing output is female-centered. In some sense, Bumblebee is also female-centered. And you know what? I didn't mind one bit, because this was female-centered done right, and if anything, Bumblebee was made better for it. This is no Ghostbusters, no Last Jedi, and no Captain Marvel, where pushing an ideological narrative is the order of the day. No, Christina Hodson just wrote a great story which happened to be female-centric. And lo and behold, there is little to no outrage over it. Bumblebee is ultimately about Hailee Steinfeld's character, Charlie. She is something of a rebel and a bit messed up, but as we learn as the story unfolds, she's only acting out, as she is still reeling from the premature death of her father, whom she was very close to. This heartbreaking loss is keenly felt throughout the movie. There are some surface-level similarities with the first Transformers movie, where the screen story also revolves around the acquisition of an old beaten-up car, which happened to be Bumblebee. The hook in the 2007 movie was a boy and his car, which was treated as a transitional ceremony from boyhood to adulthood. But in this movie, the car serves as a means of finding closure and coping with a terrible loss, while at the surface level, we are given a great new introduction to the world and conflict of the Transformers. In my mind, Bumblebee handles the relationship between car and owner, or rather temporary custodian, in a far more poignant, meaningful way than was done in the first Transformers. This is how you tell a deeper, more personal story within the confines of a Transformers movie. My biggest nitpick with Bumblebee was that when he crash landed on Earth, and literally could have done so anywhere on the planet, he conveniently touched down right in the middle of a Sector 7 unit that just so happened to be passing by at that very spot, at that precise moment in time. Other than that extraordinary coincidence, I consider this to be a great relaunch of the franchise, and you can count me among those that consider this to be the best installment of it thus far, one which actually made me excited about what the future might hold for the franchise. The movie was cleverly devised in such a way that depending on how it performed, it could both serve as a prequel that perfectly lined up with base movies, but also as a full-on reboot, if they decided the new direction launched with Bumblebee worked. Hasbro and Paramount were coy about it until the February 16th Hasbro product presentation at the 2019 New York Toy Fair. There, Bumblebee was officially declared as a, quote, new storytelling universe, which was interpreted to mean that Bumblebee had been a reboot, and that was subsequently widely reported by the entertainment media. Given how badly the base sequels had driven the franchise into the ground and painted it into corners from which there are no escape, rebooting would indeed have been the right decision. Lo and behold, however circumstantial it may be, I saw nothing but rejoicing over these reboot headlines making the rounds. Alas, that only lasted up until producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura let fans know their rejoicing might have been premature. In the decade Michael Bay controlled the franchise, fans, casual moviegoers and critics alike were all begging for a change of direction and for better storytelling. Until Bumblebee, they were summarily ignored. But for all the praise Bumblebee got, there were apparently some out there that weren't entirely happy. On March 17th, Collider quoted producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura saying about Bumblebee that the interesting part is when you set out to do something like that, you don't know exactly the ramifications of it. In this case, the ramification of it was, for the people who didn't love the movie, there was not enough action. It was funny, I was just in Japan, and one of the reporters said to me, "I love the movie, love this, and I was very tired of Michael Bay." And he goes, "But you know, after watching this film, I kind of wish it had a little more Michael Bay." According to Bonaventura, the studio took that type of reaction to heart. He went on to say that, "I know the next Transformers, our attempt anyway, is to sort of do a fusion of Bumblebee and the Bay movies, a little more Bayhem." That is anything but music to my ears, as I really liked the action in Bumblebee. I could see what was going on there and who was fighting who. In the Bay movies, all I saw during the overblown action scenes were flying pieces of metal and other loosely attached pieces of robot shrapnel, and I never could tell who was fighting who. But it gets worse. In a February 23rd interview with Japanese entertainment magazine The River, which didn't get any traction until TFW 2005 reposted the highlights on March 24th, Lorenzo di Bonaventura spoke out again. First of all, those headlines making the rounds that Bumblebee was a reboot that had fans rejoicing, yeah, he debunked that, and went on to clarify that when they said Bumblebee was a, quote, new storytelling universe, what they actually meant was that Bumblebee is a prequel that has 20 years to line up with the first Bay movie, so some liberties can be taken. He then went on to suggest that a sequel to Bumblebee probably would be the next movie out, and he expressed hope that Travis Knight would return, which means that is not yet a done deal. Something it really should have been by now. That it isn't, is in no small part on producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura himself. He really should get on that. Locking down Knight for a sequel ought to be the biggest no-brainer of his career. Next, Bonaventura went on to confirm that a sequel to the fifth Michael Bay Transformers, The Last Knight, is indeed in development, but still in very early stages. As such, he still doesn't know which story the sequel would feature, but he knows what it wouldn't feature, namely Unicron, because Lorenzo di Bonaventura doesn't like Unicron. He told the River that Unicron is too big to be caught up with fear. The size is beyond imagination. How on earth are you going to fight it? It should be noted that in the same interview, he makes a point to stress how he always pushes the visual side and flashy battles. Wouldn't Unicron make for the most visual spectacle ever? Anyway, my takeaway from this interview, or rather, this translated excerpt from a larger interview published in Japanese, is that all these years that fans have been blaming Michael Bay for the shortcomings of the Transformers franchise, they should have been blaming Lorenzo di Bonaventura instead. True, Bumblebee is from a purely financial point of view the weakest installment of the franchise. I submit that is exclusively due to the damage the previous Michael Bay movies did to the brand, and not a reflection of any shortcomings with the Bumblebee feature film itself. On the contrary, it rebuilt the credibility of the franchise, something which will benefit the next movie at the box office. There is no need to course correct, certainly not by bringing back the very mayhem that destroyed the franchise to begin with. That Bonaventura seriously contemplates continuing the franchise from the aftermath of The Last Night suggests to me that the series maybe would have been better off if he stepped back a little bit and let someone like Travis Knight or someone else with that kind of vision shepherd the franchise going forward. Are you excited about the prospect of returning to the post-Bay era, or would you rather see the whole franchise rebooted with Bumblebee? Let me know in the comments.
If you like this video, then please help share it and share your opinion in the comments. Midnight's Edge aims to give the most comprehensive analysis and commentary on genre culture and entertainment. If you would like to see more of our videos, then please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and remember to indicate that you would like to be notified when new videos are uploaded. If you really like what we do, then please support us on Patreon until a better alternative comes along, or send us a direct donation through PayPal. Also check out our sister channel Midnight's Edge After Dark for live shows and other rants. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay tuned for more here at Midnight's Edge.